All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Dave, me, and Nick here. We're doing 2022 preview and prediction for the Washington Huskies. Looking at the offseason headline, Jimmy Lake got fired after only 13 games due to an investigation, I guess, into some of his treatment of players. Not sure what the full story was, but it was surrounding that. They oust him. Kalen DeBoer comes in to take over. He spent the past 2 years as Fresno State's head coach. He was the OC from 2017 to 2018 there at Fresno. Yeah, he was good there, but I really feel like he piggybacked off the success of Jeff Tedford. That's why noting that he was the offensive play caller there is important. He spent the 2019 season at Indiana before coming back. Co-coordinators on the offensive side and defensive side of the ball. Jamarcus Shepard being the only one that wasn't with DeBoer at Fresno State, so these guys knew each other pretty well, like the additions on the coaching staff. One of the most disappointing units in all college football last year, Nick, was this offense. They started week one against Montana State, where they couldn't do anything on that side of the ball. Only 5 starters are back. Michael Penix reunites with Kalen DeBoer to battle with Dylan Morris, who wasn't all that bad last year. Nearly 2,500 yards, did have 12 picks, also had 14 touchdowns, though. Did not have much help from his wide receivers, though. Consistency, overall chemistry was way off. Only 196 yards per game through the air in conference play. Of course, they really struggled with health at wide receiver, and that was a big reason for it, too. But still, this passing game did not perform the way we thought it would.
Right, this Washington offense was absolutely brutal under Jimmy Lake last year. Fired with cause from Washington following an incident where he allegedly shoved a player. Bit murky what happened there in Seattle, but he loses his job and they kind of transition to a new set of coaching staff here. Comes over from Fresno State, DeBoer. I think it's a nice hire. Interesting to see how it goes. But this offense was woeful last year, like we touched on. It didn't help that they weren't healthy, right? I do give them, I cut them some slack there. A lot of these guys did get injured and they were struggling to find the depth. But Dylan Morris was a solid QB at times. I like the potential he has. I think Penix is also a solid guy. We've seen it in flashes from him in Indiana. But I just don't really know if these guys that are going to be throwing the ball to and be able to help him out here. I just don't really like this depth at wide receiver.
I do like what they have to work with at quarterback. They have, of course, Penix, who has a big arm, showcased his toughness in 2020, coming back off another torn ACL, though he just wasn't the same last year. Lacked confidence immensely. You could watch it in his film. Only 4 touchdowns and 7 picks. Of course, the offensive line that was protecting him was a very dreadful unit themselves, so that didn't make it any easier. 188 yards per game in the 5 games he played last year for the Hoosiers, only completed 53%. He's a talented passer, though. If he can get his confidence back, I think he can do big things here. Dylan Morris, of course, was a starter last season. Former 5-star Sam Heward is also there, so there's plenty of options to work with here. Who do you expect that emerges as a starter? Because Penix worked with DeBoer before, Morris is the veteran, though, and Heward's the 5-star, so you got 3 different options here that are completely different. What do you expect to be a starter week 1?
Right now, I think Penix is going to be the starter. I think he just has that potential that we've seen in flashes at Indiana. Yes, he is coming back from an ACL injury, and he didn't look the same after that injury, and it's a tough injury to come back from and kind of play at full strength, especially at quarterback. But during the COVID-shortened season in 2020, he really did show some skills. I liked what he had. I think his arm strength's solid. Morris could potentially start as well. His completion percentage last year was solid, 60.6, 2,400 yards through the air, but 12 interceptions to 14 touchdowns is not a great ratio at all. I think Penix should be the starter day 1 for me right now, but this Washington team, they could honestly go either way with all these quarterbacks. All 3 of them could potentially start.
I agree with Penix, but I don't think his leash will be that long. I think we'll leave it with that. The running game has been pretty weak the last 2 years. 125th in college football last year, only 98.4 rush yards per game. The biggest reason the offense struggled was not just because of the passing game, but the offensive line was pretty disappointing as well. Expected big things out of a big, powerful unit, and they kind of disappointed. Plenty of new beef in this backfield, though. Aaron Dumas comes over from New Mexico. He had 2 touchdowns along 658 yards for a terrible offense last year. Wayne Toapapa comes over from Virginia. Never heavily utilized at Virginia, but he was a solid producer. Almost 1,200 yards in his career, 19 touchdowns, 4.5 yards per carry, so some pretty good stats. They also got Will Nixon from Nebraska that joined Richard Newton, who had 500 yards and 10 scores in 2019. Hasn't did much since, but pretty deep backfield here. Depth is not a concern in this position, Nick.
Yeah, I like Cameron Davis. I think he's a solid back. Redshirt sophomore, has a good experience last year. 3.6 yards per carry on the ground, 2 touchdowns, 308 yards for him. I like the pickup out of the portal as well. I think Dumas has some potential here. Solid season in what was a terrible New Mexico offense. I like to see him kind of be involved. I like to see those 2 split carries early on.
Now, a young group of pass catchers last year, like we topped at the top of the show, they struggled against Montana State because they were without their top 4 pass catchers in that game. These guys looked lifeless. I remember watching the final quarter in that game, and they could not do anything. They gave no assist one bit to their quarterback. They're football players, though, so they produce. But it was the story of the year, Nick. These guys could not establish any rhythm one bit. They do return 3 of the top 4 pass catchers, though. So now that 12-game experience under their belt, Jalen McMillan, team-high 470 yards, 3 scores last year. Romeo Ozuni, team-high 41 grabs, also had 4 touchdowns and 415 yards. And Taj Davis was also a pleasant surprise with 26 grabs. Jalen Polk, he was hurt on the first drive, returned for the final 2 games. He caught 4 balls for 101 yards and a score in those 2 contests. So he's obviously going to figure in to be a big producer here this season. One benefit of having a bad season, it allows you to get some of these younger guys involved and get some experience. Development of these pass catchers, though, is the biggest focus.
Yeah, right. I think McMillan's a solid guy. 470 yards last year, 12.1 yards per catch, 3 touchdowns for McMillan. Solid numbers. Polk, it was sad to see him get injured early on. I think he has some serious potential. I like him a whole lot. I like to see him be involved in the offense early on. This is a decent group, that has some depth here. Taj Davis is not bad at all. 12.7 yards per catch and a touchdown to boot. But in general, this is just, I don't know if that the quarterback play is going to be good enough for this offense to succeed, and I really worry about these guys' health.
The offensive line, like I said a few minutes ago, is one of my favorites coming into the year. Lots of strength and size, and they were quite good, but overall didn't deliver like I anticipated they would. The return of Jackson Kirkland at left tackle is huge. He originally declared for the draft and hurt his ankle in the pre-draft process, so he withdrew, and I believe he's actually been reinstated by the NCAA. I believe. I could be wrong. Maybe someone in the comments could correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like the NCAA finally did something right, though. Variety of different combos they could roll out with, though, on the offensive line. Some nice physical specimens. I'm looking at guys like Nate Kalepo, Julius Buelow. Right now, I think they're on the second string, but whatever you see on the depth chart, I think it's going to be completely different come week 1. Some nice potential here on the O-line. They replaced a couple of starters, though. What are expectations for this unit? Because I think they'll regress a little bit, but I don't think they'll be too bad.
I don't think this will be a terrible unit at all. Kirkland did get a waiver from the NCAA to return for this season. He has been training with the Huskies this offseason. Super talented guy. On a bunch of watch lists there for this season, a lot of people think highly of him. I thought very highly of him pre-injury in the draft process. I like the depth on this offensive line. They have a lot of guys who have some good experience in the depth. They got a lot of leaders on this offensive line as well. Bringing back Kirkland's a huge get, but also the right side. I look at the 2 players on the right side, Kroon and Mele, both redshirt juniors. A lot of experience between the 2 of them. I like this offensive line. I think they'll be right where they were, potentially improving from last year.
Looking at the Huskies' defense, it was a good unit that was overshadowed and wasted by a brutal offense. Some really good players in the front 7. They got 2 first-round talents. Zion Tuapala, he's the first one. Great power, nice versatility, impressive interior bull rusher. Tore his ACL before the season, returned earlier than expected, and played in 5 games. Expect big things out of him this year. They also got Tuli on the interior D-line, 6'2", 313, good size and power. 6.5 tackles for loss for him last year. The D-line was not very productive overall. They did have 2 freshmen that led them in sacks. Both had 3 each. So there's some promise there. Need to find a better pass rush, though. Seville Small is a former high-end recruit. I believe he was a former 5-star. Yeah, I think that's going to be who they turn to this fall. I like what they have at linebacker. We'll get to him in a minute. But what are your initial thoughts on this D-line that has some good size and power and some good potential?
Not a terrible pass rush here for me. I think they can definitely improve this year. I like Smalls to step up and be thrown in there a little bit. He is a high-ranked recruit who didn't really pan out so far. Didn't have a whole lot of experience as well. I like Braylon Trice as well, coming on the edge. I think he's a solid player. I like to see him step up this year and be involved in the offense a little bit more. He had 14 tackles last year, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. I hope Trice can be involved a little bit, get those numbers up. This is a decent defensive line.
Yeah, looking at the linebacking core I like so much, they add Jackson Sermon. No, they lose him.
Say that they didn't add Jackson Sermon.
Looking at this linebacking core that I liked so much, they added 2 good transfers to replace Jackson Sermon, who's off the Cal. He's going to play under his dad, Peter, there for the Golden Bears. Chris Molt from UAB only played 4 games last year, but he had team-high 59 tackles from a great Blazer defense back in 2020. And Cam Bright, he was a productive asset from Pitt. Paired them up with Udufan Uafashio, another guy that's outside of Zion. This is the other guy that's a first-round prospect. He's really good in coverage, good instincts, aggressive downhill attacker. Only played in a handful of games himself last year. I think this is a really good front 7, Nick, especially with the ads they have at linebacker. This might be one of the more underrated cores in all of college football.
Very underrated linebacking core. I love Cam Bright coming in. I think he's a solid pickup. And then Chris Moll, coming from UAB, really talented player for the Blazers. Really underrated player coming from the group of 5. He steps up here to the pack to Power 5. I really like to pick up a Moll. I expect him to have a really strong season. He could be a very impact transfer early on.
They also have Carson Bruner, second on the team with 70 tackles. They also forced 3 fumbles. 3 turnovers, rather. Overall, really great front 7. I like the linebackers they have. 109th in run defense, though. They really struggled to stop the run last year. I think that's going to be the biggest focal point for them because they have the potential to do so. And if they can't do it this year, I'll just be flat out disappointed because they're much better than that. I expect better production from the defensive line, and I think these linebackers will have some much better enforcement as well. So we'll see what happens in the front seven. Look at the secondary, though. This is a defensive secondary group that's expected to take a step backwards. Number one ranked pass defense a season ago. Of course, they only had 317 attempts against their defense. Cincinnati was number 2 with 413. So obviously numbers are a little skewed. But 2 years in a row, Nick, this pass defense was great. They only allowed 6 touchdowns and had 10 picks. 2 high-end draft picks, and Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon are now gone. Brendan Radley-Hiles as well. He departs. Asa Turner, I think they're returning to him at safety at 2 picks and 34 tackles last year. Alex Cook, 46 tackles himself. They got 2 solid safeties here, but 2 new corners is the biggest thing to watch because those guys they lost in the draft are superb athletes. Those guys are elite. They bring in Jordan Perryman from UC Davis to try and do what he can because it's really hard to replace these guys. Michelle Powell as well, 6'1", 211 tackles, 3 pass breakups in his limited appearances. How do you feel about the secondary? Because they're definitely going to take a step back, but how much is the real question?
Right, it's tough with a talent like Trent McDuffie, who was a really guy I was really high on during the draft process, a really strong cornerback to replace. I think they brought in some right pieces. I think they have some pieces as well that have some potential here. Look at Misha Powell. I think he's a solid player, hasn't had a whole lot of experience. Played in the 7 games last year, 11 tackles from 3 pass breakups. I think he'll step up a lot this year. Like to see potential out of him. I think Perryman's also a good grab from the portal. I can see out of him. And the safety, I think Cook and Turner are very solid as well. This secondary should be pretty good this year. Of course, I think they'll naturally take a step back, right? I think that's very, very normal to expect out of this. But this is a solid secondary regardless. And I think they could be, one of the better ones in the Pac-12.
The roster is in pretty good shape on defense. Overall, I think this is a really good unit. What is your thoughts and expectations for 2022 because they struggled for some reason in the front seven, but now they're a lot more healthier. Of course, we just talked about the secondary, which it's kind of an iffy group, but it'll take a little bit of a step back. But I think the front seven can certainly be the catalyst and offset any losses in the back end. So what are your overall expectations for them?
I really like this Washington defense. I think Washington's been kind of known for their defense over the last 10 years or so. They keep pumping out strong defenses top to bottom. The secondary last year was obviously very impressive, produced really 2 high NFL talents. I think the front seven will be the story this year. I expect to see them, kind of overshadow the secondary. I think they'll step up and be really dominant this year. I love what they have on the edge. I think the pass rushing is great. They'll get to the quarterback with ease. I think the run defense will be strong this year as well.
We're going to schedule preview and prediction. I expect a pretty inconsistent team overall. I think they'll win games against Stanford and UCLA. Against the Cardinal, I think they'll dominate the trenches there. The UCLA secondary and the lack of pass rush is going to cost the Bruins. I have them holding up well, though. November 4th at home against Oregon State, a really good offensive line. I really think this front seven is going to control a lot for them this year. I have them getting the 6 wins. I think that's a very achievable number, maybe even more, because the offense was just so poor last year. I think with Kalen DeBoer, an offensive-minded guy, will come in and make the appropriate changes, even if the personnel is a little questionable. They host Michigan State September 17th. That's an opportunity to play spoiler for a team I picked to win 10 games this year. 6-6 for me, Nick, with losses to Michigan State and Oregon, 2 of the best teams they'll play all year long. How do you see those 2 games going, and what's your overall prediction?
Right, this is a team that I could see potentially winning 3 games or winning 8 games, right? I think that the spectrum here for Washington is very wide. I think they have a lot of potential here. I think they could easily knock off Arizona State or Arizona or even Cal, really bump that win total up to 8 or 9, or they could lose more games to Oregon State, Stanford, UCLA, and find themselves with 3 wins, because I think the 3 gimmies on the schedule are very clear with Kent State, Portland State, and Colorado. This is a solid team. I think the defense will bail them out this year at times. I just worry about this offense struggling to put up points. I think this Washington team will find themselves in a lot of low-scoring games. I'm going to have to agree with you on 6-6 this season. I do think maybe they'll trade one of those wins with another loss. Maybe Oregon State and the Cal game will flip, because I think they just have enough to beat Cal at this point. I think Oregon State's a really solid unit top to bottom. But this Washington team will continue to improve. I think they'll be kind of building towards something better in Seattle in the future. I think they'll be a team to watch out for the next couple of seasons. But right now, for me, I think they'll just be about 500.
Those 3 games in October could certainly go the other way for them, like you said. They could all 3 be wins there, but I have them losing those games. We'll see what happens. Another interesting team in the conference, 6-6, bowl game for Kalen DeBoer in his first year. That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Nick, as always, appreciate you joining me.
Thank you so much, yeah.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.